Hello, Raging Worlds here, and today we're going to be talking about the shutdown of Blue Protocol. Now, the shutdown of Blue Protocol is no surprise, as this game was kind of in trouble from the jump, and it's pretty unfortunate what has happened with this game because I was looking forward to this game coming to the West despite the censorship that was going on. But make no mistake, this has nothing to do with Amazon. You can make the argument that yes, they withheld it from you know, getting to the global side. But honestly, you should be able to survive in your own country. So this honestly goes to Bandai Namco, and it shows that they just don't know how to make a MMO. Now, in general, I never truly understood how you could fumble MMOs like this to begin with. I mean, there's so many MMOs where if they just do a couple of things, it would make it that much better. But because of these things, you know, they're just not as good as they could be, you know. And the thing with Blue Protocol, I think, let's say for example, if the combat were a lot more maybe flashy or just feel a lot more better, I would say that it would last a long time or a longer time because combat can save your game a lot. And one of the things it kind of fumbled was the combat. Now, don't get me wrong, when playing this as a solo player, this is a good experience, but when it comes to playing multiplayer, you're going to see people gang up on the bosses and it's going to crowd the enemies, and you can't really see these enemies, especially when they're small. If they're big, obviously you can see them, but it's hard to tell what they're doing because you have so many people like covering the bosses up to the point where you can't see the moves that you're doing. So instead of focusing on dodging the attacks and perfect dodging the attacks, you're going to be just spamming all the time since that's what everybody else is doing, and you can't see the attacks that the bosses are doing in the first place. And I really think that isn't fun, and that makes it worse than the solo play because at the very least you can tell what the enemies are going on, and you have to actually pay attention to what's going on because you don't have anybody else with you to crowd these enemies up. So it's like, when you're doing it as a solo player, it feels more Souls-like, even though it's not even that hard at all. But you do take a lot of damage if you're not careful. So that's why I would say the solo play is better than the multiplayer, which is really, really bad. You can't be having the solo play be better than multiplayer in an MMO game. But that's just my opinion. But I feel as if everybody else might actually feel this way and just didn't realize it and couldn't put it into words. It's also going to start to feel like it's some sort of, half action MMO and half tab target, to be honest. This is one of the only games where it's actually an action MMO, but it feels like it's tab target when it comes to the multiplayer in particular. And people don't play these games for tab target games. Now, maybe I'm the only one who feels like it's a tab target MMO to a certain degree. Once again, it does feel like this is an action MMO, but really a tab target MMO at the same time because of these issues of the game. And when you are expecting an action MMO and then you get something that feels like tab target, that's going to kind of detour away a lot of people, to be honest. And if you haven't guessed by now, yes, I did play the Japan version of the game, but I never actually got to endgame, so there's not really much I can criticize about that. All I can tell you is that it seemed like at the very least they did have content at release that makes it more than just a beta and actually a game. But honestly, that just wasn't enough, and the fact that the combat is kind of lacking, just adds to the lacklusterness of the game. And honestly, from what I've seen of the game and from the updates that I've heard that it's been making, it seemed like the game was actually getting a lot of decent content. But I think the real reason why people say it doesn't have a lot of content is probably because the content itself just is kind of lackluster. and it's probably lackluster because the combat itself just doesn't feel good. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think that people would be saying that the game lacks content if the combat was just much better. Think about this real quick for a second, right? For those of you who managed to make it to endgame in the Japan version, I didn't, so maybe I could be wrong on the content thing. But think about how much content there is, right? Now think about what if that combat was really, really good. Think about that for a second. And then imagine yourself, playing the game with that kind of combat, right? Do you think that you would be saying the same thing? That's just my question. Again, I could be wrong because I didn't make it to endgame, but it seemed like it did have enough decent amount of content from the stuff that I did play. And if the combat were as good as something like Vindictus, for example, then I don't think that people would be complaining about the lack of content so much. Because honestly, from what I've seen and what I've heard and what I've played, it seemed like the updates that were coming to Blue Protocol were actually decent, and they were coming in a decent amount of pace. So it's like, I honestly think that this could very well be a combat issue. I'm not going to lie to you. I think if this combat has something like Warframe, Vindictus, Terra, or whatever combat you think is good, like BDO or whatever, I don't think that people would be complaining about content that much, to be honest, because I think it did have enough of it. But the combat in Blue Protocol was so boring that the content itself just didn't make up for it. Once again, I think the multiplayer is worse than solo play for the reasons I have listed beforehand. MMO companies have to realize that you can get away with so much just by having a decent amount of good combat. I mean, Vindictus is still alive and running. That game has been around since 2010 and it still hasn't shut down. Alright? Sorry to dick ride it, but to be honest, the fact that it's still alive is crazy to me. Obviously, there were also other problems for this game, such as the monetization. You could be a little bit nicer about that. Come on. Like the way they're doing their monetization, I've heard was really bad. Like it started to become pay to win. It's like, you guys are so desperate, you just don't know what to do. Holy crap. Another thing is that the classes feel kind of way too basic, and it makes them kind of feel weak, to be honest. That's probably one of the reasons why the combat isn't as good as it could be, is because the classes themselves are kind of weak. They don't feel that powerful. I don't even think if you're like max level, they feel that powerful. And they don't even look that powerful too. I think it would be better if MMO games start taking inspiration from other games, or not even just from other games, from other media, from other TV shows, other series, to improve these classes to actually make them more unique and not somewhere you would get somewhere else in another MMO, right? There was a video on Blue Protocol, and this guy made a really, really good point, and hopefully I can find him.
One of the biggest thing in MMOs is achievement, and it just doesn't actually have that. It doesn't have that achievement. There is no visual representation of your achievement. No one is gonna see your character and say, wow, this person did this thing. I want to do this too because I want that particular thing. No one's gonna do that. You're not gonna see that. And that is a huge problem. It's an MMO. It's very social, and people will see what you do and don't have. If you have a person who's been playing the game for 6 months versus a person who's been playing for a week, right? Is there a way to tell their difference of their achievement, of their progression in game? No, there isn't. There really isn't. And this is important in MMOs.
There just really isn't something that you look at from another player and go, hey, I want this. So that's one of the reasons why this game just isn't as good as it could be. Look, I know combat and classes isn't everything, but if you don't get these main things right, then you have to get everything else that much more right, which, that's just going to make things harder for you. So the very first thing that MMOs need to get right is combat, because that's what you're probably going to be doing for the majority of the game. And if you don't get that right, you are setting your game up for failure. It's unfortunate because I was looking forward to this game. I'm not going to lie to you. I was looking forward to this game because of the art style. I really like the art style of Blue Protocol. And its art style is its very own, You're not going to be looking at the game and calling it a Gitchin clone unless you're kind of an idiot. Or you're not going to be looking at the game and calling it a clone for any game or saying it looks like this game or that game. Because Blue Protocol has its own unique art style, and that's what I really, really like about that. And because of that art style, when it comes to the character creations, they actually look pretty cool, or they can look pretty cute depending on how you make them, and that's what I really like about that as well. And that's another thing, when you have good models for character creation, that's going to draw a lot of people in, because a lot of people like character creation, so that's a good thing. That's one of the main things that everybody likes about an MMO, is creating your own character. And so when it comes to your own character, they also look good in cinematics too. And that's not something you usually see in MMOs, because usually your character is always going to look emotionless. They're not going to make any facial expressions. But in Blue Protocol, that is in the game. You do make facial expressions. You do actually have reactions. And you actually have a voice. You're not a mute. And I know some people like being a mute, but some people don't. So in that case, they can just add a setting where, you could choose to be mute or not. I think that's already in the game. I'm not sure, can't remember, but I think that might have been in the game. Either way, it's good to hear your character speak for people who like that kind of stuff. And to me, when your character speaks, you actually do feel a part of the world and its background and its setting. I always wanted Bandai Namco to make a MMO version of Xenoverse and Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet for their, next games, to be honest. But what's more unfortunate is to find out that they wouldn't be able to handle that kind of game to begin with. So it's like, these guys are just absolute clowns. I don't think that they should ever attempt to make an MMO ever again, because to fumble something like this is really, really impressive, and I just don't know how they managed to do it. So honestly, like I said multiple times before, it's really unfortunate what happened to Blue Protocol. But other than that, hopefully there will be a MMO out there someday that can, satisfy us and actually, be the MMO for us, right? So other than that, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching.